So today we're going to continue working on this practice board. Alright, yesterday I've already put on the 4017 and the 555. This circuit basically is just an LED trail circuit. So the LEDs will blink going from left to right or right to left. I don't know which one yet, but the 4017 is a decade counter, and it will increment by 1 every time it gets a clock signal. The clock signal comes from the 555 timer. You know, these transistors aren't really needed, and all these resistors aren't really needed, but the reason why they have them is because this is a practice board, and they want you to practice different types of solder. So you got the capacitors, you got the resistor banks, you got the, 5 resistors after the transistor here. You have the diodes here. You have additional resistors. You have the LEDs. So, technically you could just go from, this pin here to a resistor to an LED. But they decided to have the pins turn on the base of the emitter, which will allow current to flow through the LED, through the resistors and out the transistor. So this is just a very overly complicated circuit, just so that there's a bazillion components that you have to solder on. Looking at the board itself, excuse me. Looking at the board itself, you can see that here are some diodes, here are some transistors, and then we have all these resistors and the LEDs go along here. And then we got the capacitors. Excuse me, I'm not feeling too good. I am definitely coming down with a cold or something. So anyways, we got the capacitors here, and we got the resistor banks here, and there's some, these are some other resistors. So anyways, and we also got a few through-hole components. But anyways, I'm just going to put solder down on one side of the resistor. So I'm putting flux down. And in the previous video, I showed that I soldered both sides of the pads, both pads, but I'm not going to do that here. I'm actually just going to do one side at a time. So I'm going to turn my ventilation on. Right? Cool it down a little bit. So now we have solder on one side. Yeah, these solder practice boards cost about, where did that resistor go? Crap. Dropped one. So apparently I dropped one of my resistors, which means I'll probably never see it again. It's not a good thing. So R16. Yeah, these things are so small. I'll have to search on the carpet, see if I can find it. Anyways, go here. Let's get my soldering iron ready. Put that down. Hold it in place, melt the solder, let go, and the resistor is on. That simple. Yeah, you drop these things on the floor, you'll never see them again. That is for sure. So resistor 21 right there. Place the resistor down, soldering iron. Done. Resistor 26. Done. Now to solder the other sides of the resistors, I'm just going to put some flux down on them. Just a little bit. I'm just going to put a little bit of solder on the tip of my soldering iron. And just very carefully put it onto the pad. And it should solder the. There we go. It should put solder onto the pad and onto the resistor, like so. Beautiful. Now I have 3 resistors soldered on. Well, since I dropped one of my resistors onto the floor, obviously I can't find it because it's tiny. So I placed a little order on Amazon. Got a bunch of mixed value surface mount resistors, and let me show you what that looks like under the camera. As you see, here's the strips, and here's what a resistor looks like out of the strip. You can see it's pretty tiny. It's more light there. So that's a tiny component. Compare that to the tweezers. Yeah. So there's a 200 ohm resistor, as indicated by the strip and the value, but I can also measure it on the multimeter to verify. So let's go ahead and do that. Just get my lighting right here. Go. Let's measure this. Come on, get a good test. Get good contact there. 200 ohms. Perfect. Let's go ahead and solder this in place. I got all the other resistors installed except for this one, and I just need to install it. See if I can find where it goes. Right there is the missing resistor. Let's flip this around this way so I can solder in a. See what that looks like. Let's go ahead and add a tiny bit of flux. If I do that, let's put some gloves on. Flux is pretty messy. Almost as messy as my workbench. I already got that. Alright. Let's put that resistor right there. And I'm not even going to look in the microscope for this. I'll just use this my naked eyes. There, it's on there. And it's very crooked because I and I didn't have the soldering iron on long enough. Here we go. And let's go ahead. I'm not even using ventilation right now. I must not care about my lungs. A tiny bit of flux to that end. And I am going to use the microscope to see what I'm doing here. So I can see if the oops. Move that resistor and try again. This resistor broke off wasn't even the one I was working with. There's the one I was working with. There we go. I am just going to straighten these resistors out using the hot air, which will remelt the solder, and the resistors that are crooked will pop out. But I need to give this thing time to warm up. That 290, 300 Celsius. 300 Celsius should be fine. Look at that on the microscope. It looks good. Alright, using the multimeter, what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure. Put this in a place where you guys can see it. There we go. Alright. Alright, these resistors are in series. Each one of them is stupid autofocus. I really wish I could disable that, but the Logitech software only lets me disable it on one camera, and you can't really specify which one it is very easily. There we go. So you just have to be patient. So anyways, one resistor is 200 ohms. So if I were to measure, say, this resistor, it would measure at 200 ohms. And as you can see, it does. It's close to 200. So if there's 5 of them, that would be 1 kilo ohm. So we make sure all this solder is done by it adding up to 1 kilo ohms on all of them. So that's good. That one's good. That one's good. Now I actually did this the other day when I finished resistors, and I actually had to remove one of the resistors and resolder it that was in the middle because it didn't add up. It was actually doing something really weird. And when I remeasured it, after resoldering it was fine. that's 1K. Come on. 1K. 1K. Huh. That's 200. That's 400. So we can see that this is not making contact past this resistor here. So let's find out why. That's R64. So I'm going to put R64 underneath here. And it just doesn't look like it has a very good solder connection there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put some fresh solder down. Okie doke. Let's try that again. That's the one I accidentally knocked off. $200, $400, $600. That'd be 800 and then 1 kilo ohm. So we corrected that circuit there. So that is good.